about replenishment in NATO armies, almost as though it's his job for my government or something. I don't know. But point is, there's a
Catamarchy name drop here, and everybody take a drink.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. You have to drink. There you go. But in all seriousness, he has a whole fucking hour presentation about where he lists out every single fucking factory that are just producing 155 for Ukraine. And there's like, what? 20, 30 in the EU alone. And they just got contracts from all of the governments, including Ukraine's government, but across NATO, to amp up production by 300%.
Oh.
There was a Czech factory who basically said, hey guys, you know what? You want, how many shells do we normally make? Well, we make 10,000 for the Czech army every year. You want to make 400,000 rounds? Yeah. You gonna pay us for it? Yes. Bet. Okay. You know those old lines we shut down back in the old days in '91? Restart them. Let's go.
I love that. I love the. I mean, because Yugoslavia back in the day was a huge sort of production center for like Soviet era arms, and some Western arms at the same time. There's still got those huge factories sitting there that are practically dormant because they don't really need them. Now Czechia or Czechoslovakia, whatever they decided to call themselves today, they've still got them there. And they can ramp up production easily. They're capable of producing like 1 million shells a month if they want.
It's unreal.
Yeah. They can, those old Soviet factories are huge. Go ahead, Dylan.
I never really took seriously the idea that the West literally physically could not build the munitions in order to supply Ukraine. We're talking about basically the entirety of the European Union, the entirety of NATO, the United States, which is the heart and center of the military-industrial complex. You've got Australia, Japan also is getting involved in aid. Maybe not so much military aid, but that is being talked about more openly by the Japanese government. We see South Koreans sending artillery shells. It's always been a question about political will, and that's what scares me a little bit about this counteroffensive, is that if what happens is we see a lot of military casualties for the Ukrainians, or even just an expectable amount of military casualties without, I think, concrete results, that could start to whittle down the resolve of the people. And that is something that I'm concerned about. It's not about the West's, I think, ability to do it. The West can do it. It's a question if the West will bother to do it, which I hope they will, of course.
I don't have any concerns really about Western support for Ukraine.
I do, if I'm completely honest with you, and I think Russia's kind of banking on that very slightly. They're kind of hoping to ride this out to the point where everyone in the West kind of gets bored with Ukraine. They don't want to talk about it anymore. Like it's the war. It's over there. It's so far away. I'm bored of talking about it. Can we talk about something else, please? And everyone gets bored of it, and then it becomes politically disadvantageous to support Ukraine because now everyone's bored of it, and the people who are against it are starting to get louder. And I think that's kind of what Russia's banking on. And that does kind of worry me that those voices kind of start to get louder and louder and louder, which is why it's always important to me to point out that, like, Ukraine is a country with people in it, and those are the people who are suffering because of Russian aggression. It's got nothing to do with NATO expansion. It's got nothing to do with the Zelensky regime or whatever. It's literally people trying to live their life in their own country being attacked by what is literally fucking colonial and imperialism from a fucking mad dictatorship whose single response to absolutely any crisis over the past 40-odd years has been to rush all his tanks to the border and threaten to invade someone. Who actually wrote a fucking book where he stated loudly and proudly that he could put tanks and paratroopers in every single major capital in Europe within a week.
You know, I want to second this because I was at the Air Force Museum in Dayton, Ohio the other day.
Hell yeah,
hanging out with Brandon F. Hi, Brandon, if you're listening. And
hi, Brandon.
Hi, Brandon.
And we were listening to some people walking by, and we heard this guy say, like, I have a lot of opinions about Russia, but I'm so effing sick of hearing about Ukraine and, like, you know, this country I don't even care about. And Brandon and I just kind of looked at each other. We're just like, oh, what a pleasant fellow. Like, I almost said something. But you got to pick your battles, you know?
Yeah,
you see, that's the problem, Falcon. You're a good person.
Yeah, I know.
And you have restraint. I don't. I pick fights publicly too often, and that's.
I know Mark would have fucking drop kicked that motherfucker through the window.
I would have picked a fight, definitely.
In the United States, I mean, it's still overwhelming support for Ukraine amongst the American public, or at least, even in the lowest polls, it's still a plurality of support for Ukraine and support for sending weapons. That is clear, and this is even more dominant when you talk about the actual elected officials, the actual people in Congress, the actual people in the Senate, the people who make the decisions and will make the congressional approval of aid possible. Even if even worst case scenario, Trump gets in the White House and he wants to cancel all the aid, there's still a path for congressional aid to move forward. That's what Trump tried to stop during the Zelensky phone call famously, but it had to go forward because it was congressionally approved. So there's still a lot of hope. There's still a lot of reason to believe that America is still supporting Ukraine. The West is still supporting Ukraine. But that is why I'm somewhat concerned about this counteroffensive. Is we all know the war most certainly won't end this year. And the results of this specific counteroffensive most likely, no matter what happens, will not end the war. And I'm concerned about the pictures of these burnt out tanks combined with a Republican frontrunner constantly talking about the need to immediately negotiate and basically sacrifice Ukraine. That political environment is scary to me because it could just become campaign fodder. These types of photos, these types of photographs for not only Trump, but Vivek Ramaswamy and these other people who are entertaining this on the campaign trail.
I think the reason why, and forgive me, I'm gonna stand here. I'm not going to start a fight. I promise.
Oh,
the reason why I am.
Please don't fight with our guest, Anarchy.
I'm not gonna. I'm not talking about our guest.
Come on.
Our guest. I'm guest.
Okay, Anarchy, if you like Trump, that's perfectly fine.
I
understand.
Oh, he started. Okay, no, I'm not talking about fighting Dylan. I'm talking about fighting chat because I'm gonna say controversial things because, quite frankly, the reason why I don't have a problem is the nature of American military industrial complexes and the requirement of capital to continuously expand. Ironically enough, the way to defeat Russian imperialism is good old-fashioned American imperialism, quite frankly. And a controversial take, which will get me disowned by all my fellow lefties, if you give me a choice between American imperialism or Russian imperialism, I will take American imperialism any day of the fucking week.
Well, yeah, because under Russian imperialism, Russia takes away everything that's nice that you have. They take away all your resources, and they force you into being a very poor country so that you utterly rely on Moscow for everything that you need, so that you don't ever get the chance to believe that you could be independent without them. Whereas with American imperialism, you get Starbucks.
Yeah.
You know, and here's a little facet I just thought about. You can call this like the Dark Falcon segment or something, but Raytheon and Lockheed Martin could potentially make a shit ton of money out of this.
That's my whole thing. You see, the reason why I don't understand these conservatives about how they're all like, we gotta leave, we gotta do all this. Okay, so first off, I'm gonna call them out on their bullshit on this particular issue, and I'm gonna say it, magatards, this is to you. You're all talking about how, we're spending all this money on Ukraine. Why don't we spend it on America? You weren't going to spend it on America, were you? You were going to use the money that you saved by not spending money in Ukraine to give tax cuts to people like Musk and Bezos. That's what you were going to do it with. You weren't going to use that money to pay for universal health care or for education or anything like that. No. The moment you saved that money, you were going to give a tax cut to Amazon so they could open up a new warehouse and then reverse all the progressive pay reforms that they've made in the past 6 months, and then you're going to say, you see, we're using these tax cuts to prop up American business, to spur on growth. Where did all the money go? Oh, you mean all the money that was supposed to go to Ukraine went to all of our campaign donors? Well, isn't that a surprise? So don't give me this high horse, holier than thou crap. Number one. Number two, and this appeals to our resident America patriot Falcon here. This whole situation, it removed the moral aspect. Okay, I know our entire podcast is based on feelings, not facts, about how fuck Russia, we like Ukraine, and to be honest, that's still true. Okay, but remove that aspect entirely. we stand to get so much fucking money out of this. Are you mad? Because when this war ends, which it will have to, and touching wood, with a Ukrainian flag over the Kerch Bridge, when this ends,
Over Moscow.
over Moscow, even better. But in all seriousness, when this war ends, there is going to need to be a Marshall Plan for Ukraine. We're going to need the EU and NATO to roll in, and we're going to need to set up, we're going to need to set up infrastructure, we're going to need to restore the power stations, we're going to need to rebuild housing and stuff. Who do you think's going to get all the contracts for that? Ukraine's got all its soldiers coming out of the war, and the sad truth is a lot of Ukraine specialists, people who would be needed for this process, would have been killed in the fight with Russia for their freedom. So, who is going to get all the contracts? Who is going to get all the money and the bills to rebuild Ukraine's military down to its peacetime standard with a full NATO integration with what they say? They're going for the KF-51 Panther, no less. So they may have tank after the war, so they say. Right? They're going to want to go to F-35s eventually, which after the war we'll have to have a conversation about, right? When they rebuild their military and rebuild their country, who is going to get all the contracts for that? Who do you think is going to get all the, rebuild Ukraine funds set up from all the European governments? They're all those shadow corporations that own 50% of everything, right? I can't
Like the
remember.
globalists.
The globalist quotation marks. Who do you think is going to get all the contracts, all the resupply orders, all the factory construction requirements? And of course, Ukraine has, 80% of Europe's agricultural sector or something ridiculous. It has huge potential oil and natural gas reserves in the Black Sea. You also have all those factories and natural resource elements in southeastern Ukraine and the Donbass, around Mariupol and so forth. Who do you think's going to get first dibs? We are. So we get to destroy our primary European rival militarily, economically, and politically. We get all of the contracts ever for all of our corporations and private companies, and even small businesses. We get all of those. We get to reclaim all of our assets in Ukraine, because there was a ton of McDonald's and Apple stores and Amazon distribution centers and all that. There was a ton of those in, Kharkiv, Kherson, and all those other places in eastern Ukraine that are currently occupied by the Russians. We have to go get all those back. And then on top of that, the US basically imploded its entire foreign relations setup during the Trump administration.
Yep.
Then you have the war on terror, where, let's be honest, abandoning Afghanistan, well, it kind of had to be done, didn't work out, and then you had the Iraq War, and let's just say America's foreign policy capital was kind of in the dumpster between the global war on terror and Trump, right? So you get to destroy Russia, you make a crap ton of money in the military-industrial complex. The rebuilding process is going to revitalize your domestic sector, while giving you a bunch of Ukrainian workers who you then get to train and skill them up and get them back on their feet, which in turn drives their purchasing power. And who are they going to buy their products from? They're going to buy them from, as Laserfix said, Macca's, Starbucks. They're all going to be reopening stores in Ukraine, and guess where that revenue is going to go? To us. And to top it all off, America and the Western world, and the Western world governments by contrast, get to be the good guys. We win! No matter how helping Ukraine, we win! There is nothing but wins here. So I don't see how anyone can stand up and say this isn't in our interest. It's very much in our interest.
I'll tell you where that comes from, though. All the Russian propaganda that was pumped in through Fox News for the past, 10 years.
Oh, well, there goes the third.
I'm going there. I'm going right there.
What's your
care.
take? What's your take, Dylan? Am I completely out of my mind, or it's like...
I think you're making solid points about what the financial and geopolitical interest in expanding the transatlantic alliance permanently includes Ukraine, economically and geopolitically. I think you make a really good case for it. But when we're talking about Donald Trump on the campaign trail, this is not somebody who necessarily is going to listen to that argument and be like, "Wow, that was a very fair and reasonable point. You just brought this realization to me." This is a mudslinger who's going to do everything he can to smear the administration's policies, and somebody who, in my opinion, has a very favorable view of Vladimir Putin, and has on multiple occasions talked about just straight up selling out the Ukrainians in favor of him. He uses these campaign losses that the Ukrainians are taking, putting them on his social media. He's not the only one doing it. Other Republicans like Vivek Ramaswamy do it. If there's not much results in the next year, battlefield results, and we are seeing pictures of our equipment that we sent over on technically the taxpayer's dime, it makes a hell of a good narrative for the campaign trail. And Trump is one of the few people crazy enough to get in there and actually attempt to completely screw up our policy on Ukraine. And so I as much as I agree with the substance of what you're saying, I don't think the substance is necessarily going to be communicated through the Trump campaign, or the substance is necessarily going to be communicated to the isolationist American voter, which after Afghanistan and Iraq, those tendencies still exist for good reason, and some, at least to them, for good reason.
That's the interesting thing, though, because aside from volunteers and aid workers / journalists such as yourself, aside from that, not a single, officially, I mean, I'm sure there are some Green Beret Delta Force types around somewhere. Well, actually, I know there are, but we can't talk about that. Officially, not a single American serviceman. Not a single American serviceman has died or been in direct conflict with the Russian military through the course of this campaign. Not one. As I said, CIA and JSOC be CIAing and JSOCing. But at the end of the day, I don't see, like, I understand what you're saying, but what you're translating to my brain is that American isolationists are stupid. And quite frankly, yes.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I also do recognize their concern in that America has been involved in forever wars several times in the past 50 years. So I can understand where that's coming from.
Yeah, and we also need to remember, we're listening about rumblings right now of a recession. Imagine we head into 2024 and we enter a recession leading into it. So we have Joe Biden against Donald Trump leading through a recession economy, and one of the major issues on the campaign trail, possibly pushed by Donald Trump, is the fact that we're sending tens of billions of dollars of military and humanitarian aid to another country while we're in the middle of a recession. It's just not the best political environment for people who support Ukraine like us. That is something that does concern me, and this type of battlefield loss the type of battlefield losses we could see on the campaign field right now could add to that narrative. And that's the only point I'm making, is that I have a lot of concern about, if this doesn't succeed, that ammunition being added to a Trump playbook or any playbook, anybody using the playbook trying to undermine support for Ukraine.
It makes sense. We see conservatives all over the place. I mean, the only place, ironically, where conservatives are 100% lockstep behind Ukraine is, of course, the UK. But the funny thing is, the reason that is because it's the first good thing that the conservatives in the UK have done in the past 20 years.
Yeah, it serves as a good distraction because, the Conservative government has royally fucked this country over in more ways than one, because we've had a succession of gradually increasingly worse prime ministers since Cameron v. Gordon back in 2010. Brexit didn't work as planned, the government famously didn't have a plan and they argued about it for years, the country's in a major recession, everything about Boris Johnson having parties while everyone's in lockdown over COVID is coming out. I mean, he could potentially be arrested, and everything is basically the government's fault, and they're acting like entitled Eton/Oxford children because they are, and they're finding it harder and harder to hide from that fact. The problem isn't Brexit or recession or immigration or anything else. The problem is them, and it has been for the past 13 years. So Rishi Sunak has come into a country that's basically spiraling back into what it was like back in the 1970s, and he, just like every other Conservative Prime Minister Minister before him, has absolutely no idea what to do because he's a trust fund baby whose work background is being a hedge fund manager, and some problems cannot be solved by just moving money around, which is all he knows how to do, and that's all he's tried so far. So picture